Next, it's my honor to recognize and introduce Congressman David Cicilline. He currently serves in his 4th term serving Rhode Island's 1st District. He is a member of the House Democratic Leadership as co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. As a member of that committee, he has fought to keep Americans safe against threats while also working to bring our troops home safely and responsibly. We are fortunate to have Congressman Cicilline, who has really focused during his time in Congress on rebuilding and strengthening America's manufacturing industry, which is certainly an important part of our important defense industry. Congressman Cicilline.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am really thrilled to be here for Defense Innovation Days, and really happy to be with my colleague, Congressman Langevin, who just provided a great update, and to be with all of you. I want to begin by thanking Molly McGee, the Executive Director of SENEDIA, for her great leadership and for all of her incredible work and organizing this event, which is an extraordinary undertaking, and for inviting me to be part of it. I also want to recognize Tim Del Giudice, maybe in a more sincere way than Congressman Langevin, for his great leadership and incredible advocacy and what he does every day on behalf of defense manufacturers. Also, it's great to be with other colleagues, Representative Ucci and Senator DePalma, and of course in the presence of Admiral Johnson, and thank you to all of you for being here as well. As you know, SENEDIA was formed to identify and coordinate issues that contribute to our national security and provide benefits to members, to local communities, and to the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security and other federal government agencies. Your members are leaders in undersea technology, cybersecurity, and other critical defense technologies, and it was a real thrill just to visit many of the booths just a few moments ago and see some of the incredible work that's being done. With over 100 members, an amazing staff, a great board of directors, SENEDIA is making really important contributions to our state and to our country. With the growing number of global threats and their increasing complexity around the world, it's extremely important that we invest in our defense community. A strong defense industry helps keep our country safe, supports our national security interests, and contributes significantly to our economy. So I'd like to start by highlighting the importance of the defense industry to Rhode Island's economy. This industry provides good-paying, high-tech jobs that support hardworking families in our state. In Rhode Island, the defense cluster, which includes military defense infrastructure and private defense industry, supported over 29,000 jobs in 2016, or 6.2% of total employment in Rhode Island. 6,829 workers in the private defense industry, and from 2010 to 2016, employment increased by 18%, so an important growth. 4,824 individuals employed by the Department of Defense, the U.S. Coast Guard, the Rhode Island National Guard, and from 2010 to 2016, employment increased by 7%. It created over $2 billion in income for Rhode Island households in 2016 and generates significant tax revenues for our state, $146.9 million for state and local government in 2016. So this is a significant and very important part of our economy. And it's absolutely imperative that our government work hand in hand with you and your colleagues in the defense sector to ensure that we can continue to have the resources necessary to making innovative advances in technology, cybersecurity, and other defense technologies. Doing so will make the world safer, our country more secure, and Rhode Island's economy stronger than ever before. I've been very proud to support your work as a member of the United States Congress. Each year that I have served, I have advocated it with our great delegation with Congressman Langevin, who's the founder, I think, of the Submarine Caucus with Joe Courtney, but with Senator Reid and Senator Whitehouse, we have worked hard to be sure to secure full funding for the Virginia-class and the Columbia-class submarine programs. These ships will have an increasingly important role in our defense readiness and capability. Full funding for these important programs support Rhode Island jobs at General Dynamics Electric Boat and important manufacturing in our state. They're one of Rhode Island's leading defense manufacturers, employing nearly 3,600 men and women on their submarine projects, and they are expected to continue to hire workers in the years ahead. It's really critical that we support this work at every level of government and ensure that Electric Boat remains a leading employer here in the state of Rhode Island. Similarly, we must do more to ensure that small businesses have an opportunity to compete for government contracts, which is why I advocated for $42.3 million from the Appropriations Committee to support DoD's Procurement Technical Assistance Program, which helps to provide assistance to small businesses and manufacturers about contracting procedures and requirements and increasing the number of DoD suppliers. Rhode Island's small businesses truly make up the backbone of our state's economy, and it's critical that they be given an opportunity to compete on a level playing field, expand their operations, and grow their workforce as well as their companies. We know that when they have the skills and resources they need, Rhode Island workers can outcompete and outperform anyone in the world. We only need to give them the opportunity to do so. And that's why here in Rhode Island, we also need to make sure that we have a workforce that is trained for emerging job opportunities in advanced manufacturing. This is especially true for the defense sector, where we've seen strong job growth in recent years. And that's why I fought for very strong funding to support the Regional Innovation Program, which strengthens regional manufacturing networks and boosts entrepreneurship and innovation. I'm also proud that this month my manufacturing proposal became law. Legislation I introduced was included in the NDAA, which was signed by the President, and this was a proposal that will permanently establish a Defense Manufacturing Communities Program, which allows the Department of Defense to make long-term investments in critical skills building, infrastructure, research and development, and small businesses to strengthen national security innovation. Under this new law, communities will have the opportunity to apply for a 2-year designation as a defense manufacturing community. This designation will give selected communities an edge when competing for funding, as well as financial and technical assistance through the Department of Defense. Under the law, Rhode Island will have the opportunity to get a leg up on millions of dollars in additional annual funding to support our defense sector. A strong defense industry is critical to protecting our national security and makes important contributions to our economy, as I just mentioned. However, as global threats become more complex, we should also recognize, in my view, that we cannot solve these problems solely by military power and with a strong defense industry alone. We also need to utilize diplomacy, international institutions, and foreign assistance programs to help address some of the causes of violent conflict overseas. This will help keep America safe and reduce the need to send our military into conflict and put them in danger. And I am approaching my remarks today from the Foreign Affairs side, which is the committee I serve on, maybe a different perspective than the Armed Services Committee, but I think an important one. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I know that the world we face today is smaller and more intricately interconnected than at any other time in human history. And I know equally how important it is that we continue to meet aggression with strength, threat with resolve, and hostility with a renewed commitment to our alliances. The current administration has taken several missteps, in my view, in regards to important foreign policy issues that have jeopardized our national security. Specifically, I'd like to touch on the current conflicts with Russia, Syria, and Iran. Russia has grown increasingly belligerent both in Eastern Europe and in the emerging front of cyber warfare after they became involved in our elections in 2016. I've joined many of my colleagues in the House pressing for a full investigation into Russian interference in the American election. As a member of the House Judiciary Committee, I've also worked to ensure a full investigation into Russian interference in our elections and also into the investigation of possible collusion between American citizens and Russia during the 2016 election. I'm also a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee Subcommittee on Europe, Eurasia, and Emerging Threats, which has oversight on Russian activities in Europe and beyond and how they impact American security interests. Through this role, I've worked to address Russian interference in European elections, pressuring the Trump administration to take steps to counter Russian activities in the Middle East, pressing for sanctions against Russian officials who commit gross abuses of human rights, and supporting allies around the world as they face threats from the Russian government. I was very proud to be a co-sponsor of the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CATSA, which imposed really historic sanctions against Russians involved in attacking our elections in 2016. To this day, Russia has refused to acknowledge their attack on our democracy, and sadly the president continues to decline to take a stand against Vladimir Putin and treat him like the brutal dictator that he is. We cannot tolerate this as a democracy. We must make it clear that any Russian interference, or any foreign adversary for that matter, in the free and democratic elections of another sovereign nation, particularly our own, will be met with a vigorous and strong response. The right of people, particularly Americans, to freely govern themselves is not a right to be granted by a single state or ruler, and is not something that we should allow a foreign adversary to interfere with in any way. Elsewhere in the world, there is continued brutality occurring, and of course in Syria there's ongoing and a devastating civil war. In order to achieve a democratic Syrian state, free from the rule of the brutal Assad regime, we need to be very strategic about the actions we take. And that's why I have been one of the members of Congress pushing hard for Congress to take up a new authorization for the use of military force to replace the broadly interpreted 2001 AUMF that every subsequent president has used to justify military action in the Middle East and elsewhere, so that we can have a really robust debate with a clear understanding of what our objectives are and what is necessary to achieve those objectives. I was also proud to have successfully offered an amendment in the fiscal year 19 NDAA, which requires a report on what military actions and against whom the U.S. has taken under the 2001 AUMF. And I also successfully offered a second amendment to the fiscal year 19 NDAA, which requires a report on the practical effects of the U.S. military strike on Syria in April of 2018, which was carried out, if you recall, in retaliation for a really abhorrent chemical attack perpetrated by the Assad regime, but which many are concerned may not have had proper authorization to undertake, nor did it appear to be part of a larger military strategy for ending the bloodshed in Syria. And I think these two amendments are going to help raise that issue so Congress can really engage in a meaningful debate on this important issue. These two amendments will require transparency by this administration and allow Congress to analyze some of the actions we've taken to ensure that we're able to make the best decisions moving forward. Finally, in regard to Iran, the United States needs to take the nuclear issue off the table again. This should be the primary foreign policy goal of the United States and its allies, so that we can then focus on combating Iran's maligned behavior in other areas in the Middle East. And that's why I strongly opposed the Trump administration's decision to abandon the JCPOA, with really no strategy for dealing with Iran's nuclear program, its support for terrorism, its violation of human rights, or any of the other maligned behavior of this country. I'm also proud to be a co-sponsor of a bipartisan bill, H.R. 1698, the Iran Ballistic Missiles and International Sanctions Enforcement Act, which would impose sanctions on Iran's ballistic missiles program in anyone who supports it. This bill passed out of the House and is awaiting action in the Senate. These three pressing global threats are some of the most serious our country faces. We need to take them seriously, and we need to be certain that we are prepared to confront them. Investing in our defense industry and making sure that we have the resources and the innovative technology to confront these and other threats from adversaries is incredibly important. But in my view, it's equally important that we meet these threats with smart, strategic diplomatic efforts. Policy with an emphasis on respect for human rights and human dignity, smart deployment of resources, development assistance, and a spirit of cooperation will help to promote American values and advance our national security interests and ultimately save lives. Which is why, in addition to investing in our defense industry, I fight very hard to be certain that we are funding our foreign affairs budget as well, including humanitarian assistance and development aid. U.S. development and relief programs help combat HIV and AIDS. They help to cure disease, fight hunger, educate children, and more. Our foreign assistance allows us to maintain our role as a leader in the international community and helps set us apart from other competing nations that do not share our values. International development is critical to America's global standing and national security. As critical as it is, the USAID budget compromises just 1/3 of the international affairs budget and is 0.5% of the total federal budget. And even so, it supports critical development initiatives that make an outsized contribution to the security of the United States and our economic objectives abroad. Global development is and must remain a core pillar of American leadership and power, alongside defense and diplomacy that advances our interests and values abroad. It's something that for generations Americans have prided themselves on. However, the fiscal year 19 budget request by the current administration for international affairs was 25% below last year's levels. This drastic proposal prompted over 150 retired generals and admirals, former secretaries of state from both parties, Fortune 500 CEOs, and religious leaders to all come out in opposition to this proposed cut and reaffirming the importance of the international affairs budget. All of these leaders agreed that these cuts would have a devastating impact on our country's global leadership. The House and Senate, in a bipartisan way, also rejected the administration's proposed cuts and have proposed funding levels similar to last year's. Our House bill supports more funding for global health, humanitarian assistance, economic and development assistance, UN peacekeeping, diplomatic and embassy security, international financial institutions, and USAID operating expenses. Investing in foreign aid is a smart approach and one that is cost-effective in sustaining American interests and global influence. It complements and amplifies the impact of American security, economic, and strategic initiatives that are underway. I find it particularly alarming that the current administration dismisses so many of these programs and repeatedly attempts to undercut them. They don't seem to recognize the value and importance of investing in these programs, essential to our nation's economy, to our leadership in the world, and to our ability to advance security in very dangerous parts of the world. Strong funding for our defense industry and for our foreign affairs budget both are key to promoting our national security and moving towards the vision of a free, just, and humane world. I'm proud to support these initiatives and to fight for resources that will help lead us to growth and innovation in our defense industry and see the examples of those investments today. And I'm also glad to support strong diplomacy aimed at advancing American ideals and avoiding the necessity of conflict and military action. Both of these are vital and both contribute enormously to America's security and our standing in the world. I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be with you today, to convey this message, and to say thank you for what you are doing to contribute significantly to the peace and security of the world and to the security of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. On behalf of SENEDIA, thank you.
Thanks.